Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by Spartan Forge. On today's episode, I am joined by Joe Rentmeester. Joe is known for his aggressive style of deer hunting in high-pressured areas and has been featured in many hunting beast videos and content. We discuss his style of hunting, the bump and dump, target panic, and really this is based around a complete breakdown from start to finish of finding and killing his 2021 Wisconsin public land buck in an overlooked hunting area. On this week's Mountain Buck Monday Story of the Week comes from Trey Dixon out of Arkansas. And the story is short and sweet. And Trey wrote into us and said, I've been hunting off and on around a large piece of public land in the Ozark Mountains of Arkansas for 2 or 3 years now. And I finally connected with this decent buck. I'm sure there's no shortage of Mountain Buck Monday posts for you, but this deer is special in its own right to me. And Trey, that deer would be special in anybody's mind, including myself. Beautiful buck, awesome deer, and you definitely earned it. If you guys go check out the photos on either the East Meets West Hunt Instagram or East Meets West Outdoors on Facebook, the second photo you can see how Trey packed out this deer. You just got to take a look at the photo. It's pretty impressive. Like I said, definitely earned this deer out of the Ozarks in Arkansas, which is definitely, from what I've heard, not an easy place to tackle deer hunting. So congratulations, Trey. If anybody else has a Mountain Buck Monday story, definitely send them in. I post them in the order that I receive them. So if you sent one in and haven't seen it for a while, just be patient with it. If it's been a long time, send me a reminder just in case somehow it got missed. But send them into Beau at eastmeetswesthunt.com, or the easiest way, just go to eastmeetswesthunt.com and fill in the contact us form, and I will get back to you there. So anyways, just kind of some updates here before we jump into this episode. This is the weekend, I guess, been waiting for, and it is the Mountain Buck Scouting Camp. So I've got everyone coming in, and I've been putting a ton of time into preparing for this event. I really hope it goes as good as I'm planning on it. The weather is going to be a little bit cold, a little bit rainy, but we're going to spend a lot of time hiking around. We're going to spend time in the classrooms at first, building those foundations, and then going out in the field, taking a look at sign, how to read sign, looking at it from different points of views. We got Johnny Stewart there, Greg Litzinger, we have Kenny Kane, we have Bill Thompson from Spartan Forge, we have Taylor Chamberlain doing a saddle hunting demo, and also my dad's going to be there, and he's going to be walking through some of these things with us, so I'm excited he decided to jump in. Overall, it's going to be a really cool event. I'm super excited about it. And so that'll be good happening this weekend. And hopefully after that gets done, can start planning for the next one. Other than that, I did want to share a quick story for you. I went scouting over the weekend and into an area that I actually talked about in this podcast with Joe. I haven't been there in 12 months since I dropped cameras out, and there's risk in doing this with dropping cameras for that long and not going back. One of the cameras batteries died October 20th. One ran the whole year, which was good, and then the last one, someone shut the camera off around August 16th. So basically a couple of the cameras, I didn't learn a whole lot from them, but the way I look at it is, if I didn't put those cameras out then, I probably wouldn't have got back in there at all. It wouldn't have had any intel. So to me, that's still a win. I got information out of the area. It definitely seems like higher hunting pressure than I had imagined for how steep and rugged it is, and how really how far of a walk it is. I was kind of blown away by that. But the coolest thing out of that entire thing is I got a cinnamon faced black bear on one of my cameras. I've never seen that before in Pennsylvania. I've seen that in Colorado when I've hunted out there and in the western states, but never in PA. It was pretty cool. I had an ear tag in it, and I posted it on my Instagram story, and right away I got a bunch of messages. That bear had been killed, I'm not going to give specific details, but it was killed quite a ways away from where I had photos of it in the summertime. So, and then from it, literally in a day's time frame, I learned, I feel like, the whole life of that bear, which is crazy about social media, but that bear covered a lot of ground. And, yeah, so that was interesting, to be able to get that footage there, that bear, and then also to be able to hear the whole story about it. But anyways, other than that, I don't think I have anything else. Just, I will have some new beanies going up on the website. I'm waiting to take them to the scouting camp first, see if anybody's interested in there first. The last one sold out pretty quick. I did order more this time, so hopefully that they'll last a little bit longer. But these are cool ones. They have the Mountain Bucks logo in them, on a leather patch, on a brown marled beanie, and they're pretty sweet. So I'm excited to get them up. So check it out. If you sign up for the email subscriber list on the website, that's where I usually release all information first and foremost when things go live, scouting camps, podcasts, whatever it is, everything goes live there first. So sign up for that email list. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoys this podcast with Joe Rentmeester. Have a good rest of your week. All right, we're live. Joe Rentmeester, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I'm excited to talk about deer.
I know. It's funny. I guess I met you in person in 2020, I think, at the Pennsylvania Public Land Challenge camp, the one night there, and I'd followed your stuff for a while and everything, and I'm excited to get to talk to you on the show finally.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you guys have beautiful country out there. I kind of envy what you have. Excuse me. You guys just have miles and miles, and you can get lost out there. Yeah. Around here, you can you walk a little further and you hit the next road. So I envy that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we're definitely very lucky in Pennsylvania to have, and just I guess in the area of Pennsylvania that I live in, to be able to have all of that. And I took that for granted until I moved away and moved down, in the Pittsburgh area for a while. And I was like, man, this is difficult to try to find, small public land chunks or whatever, when before it was like anything that wasn't posted was just like open hunting, from just everything was like that. So yeah, I definitely take it for granted sometimes.
And it sounds like it's gotten better and better for you guys over the last, say, 10 years. Like there's been a lot of management. Would you say you've seen that?
Yeah, definitely. In the last, I don't know, 15 and actually going on 20 years. It's almost been 20 years since the antler point restrictions. I truly believe that had a huge impact on the quality, and also the timber management, and the foresters have done a great job with that, and game commission and everything else. They've done a very good job at kind of managing things, and not everybody will agree with that, but I believe so. I think that I've never seen body sizes of deer so healthy, and the antlers and age and all of that stuff is coming with it. The population is quite a bit lower than it was, in the 90s and stuff that you hear, the glory years, but I don't know. I like where everything's at right now. I feel like we are kind of in the glory years, and hopefully that continues.
Good.
Yeah.
And you hear about just as many people headed out to Pennsylvania to hunt as you do some of the states like Ohio and stuff like that. So you guys are really starting to work your way up there in terms of quality of animals and people pursuing them.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's pretty cool to get to see. So Joe, tell us a little bit about where you're from, and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm from southeastern Wisconsin. Grew up where I grew up hunting. It's more so your farm country. It's a lot of farms that were purchased from the Department of Natural Resources, and then they kind of overgrew. So you get some apple trees in some unique spots. You get some swamps. You get some overgrown fields with young trees in them that deer kind of bed in. Or there's just a lot of unique different types of terrains because of what we have out here. Not huge blocks, very high pressure out here. There's a lot of bigger cities around. Milwaukee's not too far away. There's a number of other cities. But yeah, I guess I grew up hunting out here, grew up hunting some private, eventually started realizing the bigger deer were on public. The private that I hunted gets hit pretty hard. We got 13 guys on a small amount of acreage. So yeah, and I just kind of took it from there and just, like a lot of you guys, just obsessed with it and kept tinkering and learning. And one of the things I say when I was young, with my dad, I don't know, 12 years old, whatever, we do a lot of deer shining. Can you guys deer shine in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, that's a big, we call it spotting, but same thing.
Okay, yep. So we do a lot of deer shining, and you see those absolute giants. And I remember just as a young kid, you'd sit and go, man, maybe someday I'll be able to kill one. And now, finally, 30 years old, we're starting to figure out how to kill some of them. And it's just cool to see something that you always wanted really, really bad and learn and figure out the tactics that it would take to kill them. So it's cool. They're there. They're hard to kill, but they're there.
Yeah, that's the same thing as, like, growing up here is, we called it spotting, like I said, but we go out and we go to all these private fields that we couldn't hunt or anything, but just go to spot them, and love seeing the bucks out there, and just could get me pumped up as a kid. That was like, something I look forward to. So I can relate to that. The one thing that's interesting about especially your location is, like, it's hilarious. Like, when I look at areas, like if I'm going to go out of state or even in state, like I look for major population areas and like go away from there. And you're like in the center of all of it, with Chicago and Milwaukee and all that. Like that's a difficult place. So you definitely grew up with a school of hard knocks from that standpoint.
Yep. We get a lot of deer. They'll disappear, fall off the face of the earth, and you wonder where in the heck they went. And we had one, it ended up being like 8 years old was the last year that I knew about it. It disappeared. And this year I was kind of scouting that area, working my way through, and I got to the road, and there was a young man on the road, and I started chatting with him, and I said, "You ever kill anything in here?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, a few years ago I killed a 8-point in here." I'm like, right away it clicked. I'm like, "You got any pictures of it by chance?" And he showed it to me, and I'm like, "You have no idea what you just killed." And I'm like, "That's like an 8-year-old deer, right?" He's like, you think so?" I'm like, "I know so." And I shot it, and he took it back home. He lived an hour away, and they get whacked and they get taken back home to far away and disappear. So it's cool. It's part of the game. But.
Yeah. It's funny like that. Our rifle season is definitely, bow season isn't as high a pressure, but the gun season is pretty crazy at times. And every year I'm like, if I'll like put cameras out or check them, like, did the bucks make it? What happened to them? Like, it's, we still get like the local papers or people put the bucks in there, but I'm like, well, if people come from out of state or somewhere else, like, how am I supposed to know? I've found them on social media before, like bucks that I was hunting. Yeah. And I've actually, it's a similar story. I messaged a guy and I was like, man, like, and I was like, you don't have to tell me, but I was like, did this buck come from this general area? And he's like, yes. And I was like, I started sending him trail camera pictures, and I was like, man, this deer's, I started getting pictures of him in 2015 and he killed him in 2021. I was like, this is insane. I was like, and actually he was bigger, a couple of years before that. I was like, but that's just a deer I could never figure out. And it's funny how you get like obsessed with that and trying to figure it out.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. No. And that's, figuring out how they killed it is an interesting thing. And he said it was sneaking. It looked like it was tiptoeing, sneaking back into a swamp at 10 o'clock, opening morning of gun season. The buck knew he had screwed up. He was trying to sneak out when all the hunters were out of the woods. Like it was clever, but that deer always was clever. But yeah, same.
Oh, that's so funny how you ran into him and just so happened to be the guy that killed that deer and that he's giving you the story behind it. Like that's pretty cool. And so like, it sounded like that you grew up kind of in a hunting family then? Yeah.
So nothing crazy. It's just the typical, like if you watch Jake from THP. It's kind of the Wisconsin hunting tradition. Everybody suits up and blazes orange from head to toe, goes out and shoots whatever. It's like that. My dad, he did his bow hunting. If he shot his 1.5, 2.5-year-old buck, that was cool. Once in a while, he'd get a good one. And that was kind of the gist of it, but it's kind of the tradition out here.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And we always talk about Michigan and Pennsylvania being similar, but I feel like Wisconsin's kind of grouped into that thing, and even some of Minnesota with like that deer camp tradition and having that blaze orange jumpsuit and the meat pole and everything else.
Yep, it's just like that.
So when did you like really get into I guess really seriously hunting deer? Because like from meeting you, one of the first things I realized from meeting you in person, like I've heard you or watched you on some of Dan Infalt's videos and stuff before, and seen you on Instagram and whatever. But when I met you, you can tell right away when someone's like super obsessed with deer, because all they do is ask a million questions about like specific things. And I pulled that from you, and I'm like, that's awesome. Like you were, when I was talking about something, you were just like asking a bunch of questions about the area and really trying to soak all of that in. And I'm like, man, this guy, you can
be annoying. You got to be careful.
I want to do the same thing. Like I just love. Well, obviously, I have a podcast where I ask people questions, but it's like I love learning. And you were just like, no matter who is talking, like it didn't matter. Everybody there was pretty successful deer hunters, but like just trying to understand like their perspective and what they see and what they do. And I obviously knew right away. I was like, all right. When did that kind of start for you, as far as getting serious into it, and how did you kind of learn in your style of hunting sorts?
So, I mean, you could go back pretty far on this. So me and some buddies talk about this sometimes. Some of the guys that are absolutely eaten up with it, it's kind of in your DNA. It's something that's just there. So like, if you hop on my Instagram and you scroll down, there's a picture of me. I don't know. I was maybe 5 or 8 years old or something like that. With I think I had a gun in my hand with the orange end on it, a fake gun. And I remember at one point I was out behind my parents' house, and a buck and a doe ran by. There's a hill behind my parents' house. A buck and a doe ran by, and I saw them, and it was the coolest thing. And my dad took a piece of wood and cut the shape of a deer out. So in the picture, I'm standing there with this fake gun and the cutout deer next to me. And it was just so like, my brother didn't do that. It was just something that was kind of ingrained in my brain. And then I remember, you guys have KFCs up by you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we do.
We would go to the KFCs, and I would save all the plastic knives, and then I'd run around the hill with the with the plastic knives. That was my weapon. I thought I was going to knife a deer. So it was ultimately when I was young, but it was just something that was always ingrained in my brain. And then as soon as I was old enough to hunt, the first year, actually my very first hunt ever, I think I was 12 years old. I had a doe come through. I shot her, thought the shot was iffy. She ran off. It was actually a perfect shot. She ran off, and then my memory I had a buck come in after her. My memory tells me it was probably like 120-inch buck is what my memory tells me right now. But that was how many years ago? So I don't know, maybe it was like a 80-inch buck, and that's what my memory tells me. But I had this buck stand in front of me forever, feeding on acorns. Back then, we had what was called a hunter's choice, so you shoot one or the other. And I had already shot the doe, and that buck stood in front of me. And I remember my dad telling me, just hold still. Like when you have a deer in front of you, hold still. So I was just glued to the tree, motionless, and I was hooked then. I was eaten up. I remember going home and telling my parents about the story, and I was wild about it. So yeah, kind of the start.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And so talk a little bit about transitioning a little bit further ahead, like kind of your style of hunting. If you had to put it in kind of an elevator pitch of what your style of hunting looks like, kind of explain that.
So I would say for me, it's almost targeting specific bucks, regardless of what territory, what area they're in. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah, but yeah, that's definitely so like okay, you're targeting a specific buck depending on what area. So you like to hunt like you're not like okay, I hunt specifically swamps or I hunt specifically big woods or farm country. You're like I want to find a buck I want to hunt and I don't care where they live at. I want to hunt them.
Correct. Yep. And they don't even have to have huge racks. Like I want it to be a mature buck.
Yeah.
We don't have high scoring deer around here. If you go outward to the south, they score a little higher. But it's gotta be a specific buck I get obsessed with, I get eaten up with, and it's just all day long you sit and think about how you're going to kill that buck. Now, I've talked a lot about swamps and hunting swamps because we have a fair amount of them around here. And what usually ends up happening is you find a buck that you want to kill, whether you shine him, get him with the trail camera, you glass him in a field, whatever. And then when you start kind of tracing that buck and working back to where, to where he lives, it usually ends up being in a swamp. So that's how I usually find myself in swamps quite a bit. Okay. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Cause I feel like a lot of the stuff that I've seen of you early on and stuff had to deal with being in swamps, but that makes sense, especially in your location of where you live at and everything else. So that definitely makes sense. And how did you get, hooked up with Dan Infault and getting to hunt with him? Is he a family friend or how did you guys kind of connect?
No, so that was just at a very very young age. When I was eaten up with all the stuff at a young age. I went on the Hunting Beast forum and just sat there asking millions and millions and millions of questions, and got to know him that way.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's funny. And but there you go again. That comes down to like asking questions can help you so much, and just asking, why this, why that, and then trying to confirm that kind of stuff for yourself is such valuable information. Yeah. And the people that do that, I feel like that aren't afraid to ask questions. You can't get answers to questions you don't ask, I guess.
Correct.
Yeah. So with that being said, it seems like that your hunting style is relatively aggressive. Like, so when you're hunting a specific buck, how do you kind of draw that line of like, okay, I want to aggressively pursue this deer, but I'm hunting this specific deer, so I don't want to screw it up. Do you think about that at all, or how do you think of that process?
Yeah, I do, and it's changed over the years. So, for example, there are certain swamps where I had a buck that would live in that swamp, and I would sit there and I would just bounce around and beat the heck out of that swamp and beat it up. And then, like there was one buck, for example, and then I did that, and then gun season came along, and the buck ended up getting wounded just outside of the swamp where I was entering the swamp. So then I learned that I was too aggressive, and then I did that a number of times in a number of different situations, and now I've learned I'm getting better at kind of going in when it's hot, picking the cherry, and then getting out of there. So that's evolved. It's still evolving. Obviously, every deer is different. Some deer you can get away with multiple sits on. Some deer you can't. Like in the swamps, the reason they're in there is because, around here anyways, the reason they're in there is because nobody else is in there. So like you talk about like bump and dump. And here's one thing I learned from my hunt this year. So you talk about bump and dump, and I'm curious if you've had success with it as well. But when you go into the swamps, I've tried it time and time again. You'll jump up a big buck, and then you'll get back in there the next morning to hunt him, and he doesn't come back. Or you wait a week and he doesn't come back. And it's like they don't have human scent in there. So when you do spook them, they are freaked the hell out. But now you get, what I've learned this year is you get on the dry land where there's people all the time. They're getting bumped around. They're getting nudged around. You can bump him out of there. He'll come right back in the next morning because he's getting bumped out 2-3 times a week. It's just part of his thing. He gets bumped out. He loops back around. How aggressive you can be, I guess, varies depending upon like what kind of deer you're hunting. If some of the deer, it seems, have multiple spots where when you bump them, they'll run to the next spot and they'll be in one of these 3 major areas. Some of the deer have that one spot where they want to be. It varies so much. You have to kind of gauge that and pay attention to it.
Yeah, it is funny that you say that because I've had such varying experiences with that. For the most part, I feel like that if I bump a deer once or twice, I'm not like they're not gone from the country. And like I rarely find like in the areas that I hunt specific beds that a deer will bed in all the time, but I'll find an area like it might be a specific cut or an edge of a cut or something that like this deer is living in, but he's kind of shifting around, and like I've been able to bump them and them still come right back there because I feel like they have such good escape routes. And this is my theory of, and I have very limited experience with swamps, so don't this could be off the wall, but like I feel like they feel like they're confined. Like when you're out like on an island or something, you get this water and stuff around, like it's a little bit more limited, where like in a lot of the big wood stuff, like they can run in a bunch of different directions and get away and feel like they were never really in danger. You know, not like their back was against a wall, so to speak. I don't know. That's just kind of a thought I have, but I feel like it is personality driven. There's a deer I was hunting in 2020, and I had some encounters with him, and I had him at full draw. I never got a shot. In 2021, I felt like I put too much pressure on because I knew where he was living at, and I was like, in there probably I got too confident in like that I felt like he wouldn't, I don't know, I just didn't feel like he was gonna run out of the area, but he completely disappeared on me and did not do anything like he did the year before, and he ended up showing up like late in the rut and on my cameras, and he had made it through, and that was after I already killed my deer. But still I was like, okay, what was it, me putting pressure on him? Was it there was also like a new logging cut that was put in there. There was no acorns that year. So it could have been food related and not related to me, but it makes me think, you know, it's really hard to tell.
Yeah. And you don't, you know, maybe that buck's, I have a situation right now that I keep thinking about last year, and I knew the buck was in this certain area. I went in and hunted it the first morning when I figured out he was in that area. And I heard a funny sound in the dark, like 20 minutes before light. And then after that, he was gone from the area. And I wondered, what was he in there solid? And he nailed me in the dark, and that was it. You don't know. You don't know if you screwed it out. There's no way to figure that out.
Yeah. So, yeah. No,
I get it.
That totally makes sense. And like, so with that being said, let's kind of dive into the story of your 2021 buck and kind of where that started in. Tell me if I'm wrong, but from following along with your posts, so you had a really good Instagram like series of posts that made me like, I was just like, I loved reading along with it. I love hearing stories, and it sounded like it started in the spring of 2021. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, spring of 2021. Sorry.
Yeah. The year
starting in spring of 2021. Yep. So, I guess to get into it, new area that I'm picking apart, it was just something new I wanted to start looking at. Usually I find the deer and then the area, so to speak, but this time I was just doing a little bit of spring scouting and walked through this whole area. And when by the road, there's kind of a thicket. And when I was walking along in that thicket, there were some good sized rubs that kind of make you pump the brakes and pay attention to them. They're obvious. It was from a bigger deer, the height of them. It was obvious something was going on there, but it's, again, in this area, it's so high pressure. I thought the deer is probably dead, but we'll pay attention to this, and I'll come back and take a look, run some trail cameras, and maybe there's something in here. Maybe something will come of it, but I didn't put a lot of weight on it. And I just kept scouting through, checking things out. And then one time, and you can see this on Instagram, as I was headed back to my car, I caught a big track in the gravel on the side of the road, and it was obvious that it was a huge track from a big deer. And that was when I kind of knew, hey, there's a big deer in here. He's still alive. And just looking at it, there really wasn't any swamp around, so I knew it would be a whole different ball game. And what the terrain is kind of made up of, it's big woods with subtle rolling hills. There's some aggressive hills, some subtle rolling hills, but it's super high pressure. I mean, the squirrel hunters, the hiking trails, the horse trails, the snowmobile trails, it's super high pressure. So I knew if he was in there, he was living amongst that.
So now, hold on one second. So don't mean to cut you off, but like when you When you're talking about the high pressure, is it high pressure from hunters too, or a lot of like non-hunting pressure?
Yeah, so it's hunters. So what that I'm realizing with this area. So everyone's starting to kind of focus in on swamps, and there's just so much buzz around swamps. Everyone's headed to the swamps. Anybody that's a decent hunter kind of understands that the deer are in there. And what's happening, what I'm observing happening in this type of area is your hunters that are not doing any research, not figuring anything out, like how do I say it? Like you're not very good hunters are headed for these places because they're like, oh, I'm going to walk up this horse trail and I'm going to step off it 20 yards and I'm going to set up here and drink my Mountain Dew. And
Yeah.
I say that because there's litter everywhere in here. It's the weirdest thing. and those are the kind of hunters that are hunting this. And any hardcore guy or sort of hardcore guy is going to look at it and go, that's crazy. I'm not going to go in there. There's horse riders. There's all these people that are sloppy hunters. There's ribbons everywhere. It just looks like crap. Well, what's actually happening is those not good hunters are not killing the deer that are in there, and the deer are learning how to navigate around the people. And that's something I learned about this area later, and it's very interesting to me because it's opposite of what you think. Like when you talk about overlooked, it is truly overlooked in a sophisticated way, sort of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you had to learn to play off of those hunters a lot. And like when you have high hunting pressure in areas like the deer figure it out. And I always think about this like with the popularity of Western hunting. And I talk a lot about that on the podcast and everything, is like as things become popular, but those animals still find ways to live with it, and they find those gaps, and that's kind of what you're discussing here.
Yes. Yep. And what's cool is you can go in there and you can see where the people are leaving their litter and sitting. You can see where the people are cutting branches and spending time. You can see, I remember once I figured out what this deer was and that I wanted to hunt it, I remember I did a lot of summer scouting, and I was walking through one day in a spot where I had normally walked through. Somebody drove a tractor off of the private and mowed some paths. And I later figured out I won't get into why they mowed the paths because I don't want to give the spot away too much, but they mowed some paths, and I saw it and I was like, Jesus, this is ridiculous. And then I started to really think about it, and I'm like, you know what, this is going to kind of work to my benefit because these are paths that the people are using these paths. So I know the deer are not around. They're not on the path. I mean, they might be watching the path. So then you start taking all that into consideration. You're almost eliminating spots by figuring out where people are hunting, where people are walking and messing around. And it was, in a way, when you kind of look for the positive side of it, it was making it easier for me because I could rule a bunch of spots out. It was funneling all of your more basic style hunters. It was kind of funneling them all, and it worked to my benefit.
Do you do anything like where, say, you have either a printed map or online or something where you like highlight those areas and like look at it from a big picture, like, okay, or does it just kind of in your mind of like, these are the areas that I'm going to avoid because of this? Like, how do you take that information and apply it?
I don't like map it out or anything. It's, for me, I guess it's more so in my head because you always have to take into consideration that deer might be laying 30 yards off that path in the brush. That path might have created an overlooked spot, and now I can use that to my advantage where he wants to watch and see what's going on right there. So we can be our own worst enemy. You know what I mean? You might go, oh shoot, there's a path over here, I'm just going to stay out of there. Well, no, maybe he's there because he can watch that path. Some deer. One thing I'm finding quite a bit is if a buck, tell me what you see. If a buck has an opportunity to observe people and be safe, or live way back deep and every once in a while get the crap scared out of him because somebody surprised him, which one would he rather do? And I'm starting to see more and more these bigger, older bucks, they want to monitor us. They want to watch us. I'm seeing it more and more. I know the personality of every deer is different, but that's something I'm starting to play off of and use to my benefit. How about you? What are you seeing with that?
I immediately thought of a story of this buck that I hunted that the listeners, if they listen back far enough, have heard of this deer. I called him Hercules. He was just like this back when I used to name deer, and he was like this just giant buck. And I actually found his shed in a bed that was like 25 yards off of like this gated road where everybody walk in, including myself, and I'd walk right past this spot, and he had shed. It was like third week in December. I found it like Christmas Eve, and he was watching. Literally, you could see where the bed was wore down, log to his back, and it was like, this was kind of like flatter big wood stuff, and it was kind of swampy, and there was just like one little group of trees, and then there was some higher grass, and he could see that trail. So I crawled down in the bed and looked, and I'm like, this is perfect. But like when you get from the trail, it doesn't stand out as a place to be able to notice, and just the way the logs were in the background, you'd never see him laying there. And I'm like, this deer, and I found some other spots that I thought that he bedded in that were similar, close to that area, that all watched this trail, because I found some big rubs that kind of led right on the edge of it. And I was like, and that made me think a little bit about that. And there was another area that I was hunting that had like an ATV trail that went through it. It was the same situation, that I didn't know the specific deer that was using this spot, but I'd found some big beds and rubs that had left leaving these beds, going back in, but they were watching these trails. And I was like, that's pretty incredible. Like, and I know from like gun season and when you put on deer drives or anything, a lot of these deer aren't getting up until you're like right on top of them. So I think they want to be able to watch with it. So I think it's very situational for me. But I have found in areas that do have trails and stuff like that there's a lot of situations where I think these bucks are monitoring us better than we're monitoring them.
Yeah. Yep. They like to know what's going on. They do.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you say, there's plenty of deer, I guess, that I know about that sink in deep and they avoid people until it's jet blackout, and then they head out to the crop fields.
Yeah.
So it goes both ways, but I'm seeing more and more deer that like to observe people.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy but being able to pick up on that and you can use that to your advantage, and try to figure it out. So based on that intel, when you scouted that area and found it, what were you thinking, and kind of where'd you move from there?
Yeah, so in summer, like I said, I saw the big track. Summer came along. I started running trail cameras. I immediately got a photo of him. It was a daylight photo, kind of at last light as he was coming down this one ridge. And I'm like, cool, he's right in here. This is going to be really simple. He was the first velvet picture video I got of him. He was good. Like I wasn't crazy about him, but he was good. And then as I pulled my camera out of there and I started searching for other deer. And then as summer went on, I thought, man, that deer's maybe bigger. He's got to be huge by now. It's been like 2 months. I wonder what that thing is. So I stuck the camera back in there, got a picture of him in a different spot. There was a tree that he was feeding under, an apple tree, and got his picture right away. And I was like, crap, that's a deer I want to shoot. So then it's time to start scouting during summer, because I don't have enough intel at that point. I want to get my scent all over in there, get all my dirty work done in the summer, figure it out, and then get out of there and kill them when the season starts. So I did a ton of scouting in the summer, found a little spot where I guess a little piece that he was going through, there were some rubs, and you could tell they were his from last year, mature rubs. And it was, I guess we'll call it a little funnel. And I stuck a wireless trail camera up there, and I had him coming through this little pinch every morning going into what I would call a bedding area. And I don't want to, we'll call it a grassy bedding area is what we'll call it. I don't want to describe it too much.
Yeah.
But he wanted this grassy bedding area right at first light. There were some mornings where it would have been close to your legal light. It was still summer though. And I thought, man, I'm going to get opening morning and I'm going to crack him. It's going to be pretty simple. And the phone would go off every day, ping, ping, ping. It was so simple. I thought, nobody's hunting this deer right. You can kind of tell what's going on here. I'm going to kill him. And just like they do, right around Velvet Shed, all my buddies are saying their bucks are disappearing, and boom, he fell off the face of the earth. And I got one photo of him days before the season in Hardhorn. And I'm like, okay, he's still in the area. We have a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot. We've got a few refuges around here. And the deer, when the pressure gets on, they go into those refuges and they live in those refuges the entire season. Eventually they get killed. They slip out with a doe or something like that. And that's always a worry. When the season hits, is he going to end up sinking down to that refuge? where he's going to be left alone and I can't hunt him anyway. I spent all this time on this deer and he's going to be in that refuge. So early season came along. I still had no idea what was going on. I think I hunted opening day once and I ran into a bunch of people and I was like, this is crazy. And so then I started working trail cameras around and I found we had a really dry year and I found a little wet spot and stuck a trail camera over that wet spot. And I had him come in one night on the wireless trail camera. I think it was like an hour after dark to that water. And the direction he came in, I was like, holy crap, he's back in the woods somewhere. He's still here. So he's using this area. And I previously talked about the spot by the road with all the rubs and stuff. I thought that might be a spot I'd be able to kill him, right by the parking lot. And I went in there and people had it all hacked and cut. And there was some dude that was like notching a tree with a knife wherever he would walk. I don't know if that's how he and I'm like, okay, if this deer's not in here. And so that was that. It was, I put on a crazy amount of miles. At one point, you can go on my Instagram. I got up into a little, I guess you'd call it like a 1 or 2 acre clear cut that had been clear cut. And I'm not a good gauge of this, but I don't know, 10 years ago. And they just clear cut this little spot on a kind of a side hill. And the trees grew back up. And what actually kind of helped me, so a lot of people tell you it's hard to read sign when everything's green. And in this situation, you can kind of tell where the deer are able to walk or where they are walking because you can kind of see the funnels or the trails or the openings. And it actually, in my opinion, it worked to my benefit. And I kind of was following trails and it led me right up into this little, this overgrown clear cut. And I got in there and you could, again, see his sign from last year. And if you go on you can see the video on Instagram.
Yep.
I did a lot of, my buddy Justin Wright hunts in Missouri a lot. He lives in Missouri and he hunts a lot of very similar terrain. So I said, dude, I'm going to pick your brain like crazy on this deer on how to kill him because I don't have the knowledge of the hills and the thermals and all that like a lot of people do or like he does. So I was always sending him videos. What do you think of this? Check this out, whatever. And there was another cut just below this one that had like, I guess you'd call it a signpost rub. I know there's a lot of technical terms for different rubs. And I heard you talking about it. You were running trail cameras on signpost rubs when I was listening to your podcast today.
Yeah.
But I stuck a trail camera on the signpost rub and I stuck a wireless up in the bedding area. And I left them there for, I think, like a month, both of them. And just got pictures of little bucks. And I eventually pulled the trail camera out of the bedding area, but I thought I'll leave the one on the signpost rub and check it eventually. And this is where it's so important. So many people, I think, would make the mistake and say, nope, he's not in here. That's it. On to the next spot. And you got to remember there's different times of the year where they want to be in different places. So I just kept it in the back of my brain. And I had an encounter with a different buck in a whole different area. I don't know if you want to get into that or not.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I'll just make it simple. So a whole different buck in a whole different area. A nice, I don't know, 130-inch buck right off of the road. I had the buck come flying in really fast. I drew back. I realized the camera had you had to close the shutter door for the SD card. I was screwing around with the camera. My elbow hit a knot on the back of the tree and I rushed the shot and I messed it up. And that was when I was like, all right, we're going to put the camera away and we're just going to focus on killing deer here for a bit. So that was why I didn't end up getting this kill on film. Now, while I was hunting that buck,
hold on. I want to comment on that because I've mentioned it on here before. Like I've never self-filmed, and I've tried it. When I say I've tried it, I've got the camera arm set up on the tree and got frustrated enough that I never even got it set up because I was just like, this is a lot. There's a lot of things going on. I have enough trouble with trying to keep myself in the present moment and executing the shot like I need to as it is. I don't need a camera screwing this whole thing up. And then this year I was like, I'm gonna run a camera. I'm gonna do this. Actually bought a nice camera but I still had this the big clunky tree arm and I'm trying to figure out how to get it. And I remember that opening morning, I'm I got my tree and I have all my stuff and I'm like, no, I'm not going to set it up. And then I ended up shooting shooting my buck into the spot, but like literally if I would have had my camera arm on the tree, like never would have had to move it, just hit record and it would have been perfect. But it's one of those things. I struggle with it hard. Like I've been looking at like maybe getting one of those like 360 cameras or something that I see people using now, that it seems like you don't have to move it around and it at least gets decent footage. But I love capturing stuff on film, and I love the filming act, but the filming and hunting from a tree standpoint is very difficult for me to get my hands around or get my head around.
Yeah, it's hard. It is really hard. And once I lost the camera and the camera arm, the weight that came off my back and the speed at which I was able to set up and tear it down, like all that stuff became so much easier. But now I sit here without footage of the kill, and it's like, damn.
Yeah. Well, you captured quite a bit on film before. Like you've been doing it for quite a while. So I give anybody credit that does that, because it's not simple.
Yeah, and I've said, and I've heard other people say this too, that I always felt like it helped me stay calm, because you're just like in business mode. Everything's strictly business. I'm getting this thing on video. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Rather than just sitting there with the tip of your arrow shaking 2 inches back and forth while you're all wound up. You're focused. You're in the zone. You're doing your thing. And I always felt like, in a way, it helped me. And I've heard other people say that. But now I've gotten target panic. So a lot of people think target panic is buck fever. It's not. Target panic is where you anticipate the shot and you flinch when you're supposed to be shooting. Like if you actually go back and listen to my video of the buck I shot in Minnesota on the Public Land Challenge, you can hear I was at full draw on the buck. I was about to squeeze the trigger and I anticipated the shot, and you can hear like a little whoosh, whoosh, and that's my arrow going forward and me yanking back on the rest. And it didn't show it in the film, but the buck snapped his head up like, what the hell was that? And I was like, Joe, get your stuff together. And I just squeezed through and hit him perfectly.
Yeah.
But I've got to panic terribly. So maybe I need to put the camera away and get some things fixed. So we're working on that. Maybe I'll throw a GoPro on the stabilizer.
Yeah. So like a tact cam or something that's on there and ready to go. It's funny because like I struggle with I've struggled with target panic for years, and like one of the best things that like has helped me, and I've had you'll have to go back and listen to a podcast I did with Joel Turner. It was it was a very, very good, and I actually got to meet Joel and have him kind of coach me at a elk shape camp I went to, and like he talks about just like going through the shot process and like talking yourself through it to put yourself in the conscious mind, not the subconscious, and consciously making every decision as you're going through and literally talking to yourself through it and doing that every single time you practice, every single arrow. And his mantra is like, you always shoot a perfect arrow. And that doesn't mean you're going to hit in the perfect spot every time, but like you're always surprised. You always have this way of doing it. And he puts it in a way that I've never had anybody else be able to explain to me for me to understand it. And it's helped me immensely. So I'd listen to that and check out some of his stuff, because it's if you still struggle with it, I think anybody can be refreshed on it. I mean, it always comes in like waves with me if I start getting off track and coming down to the discipline of doing that is like, but I can see where, trying to run a camera and doing that can kind of take your mind in a different spot.
Yeah. Yep. That I think I wrote that in my post, the conscious and the subconscious mind. Like there's so many things that are supposed to be happening in that moment of truth. And when you add videoing in there, you are adding a big thing into there that's taking away from something else that might be important. So yeah, you're exactly right. I will definitely check out Joel Turner.
Yeah.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, you definitely should. Anybody like he's just been like, I just rave about that guy because he's so helpful and is very good at teaching and helped it out a lot. When I was at just a quick side story, like when I was at the elk shape camp and we were shooting and they made us like shoot at like the steel target that just had the vitals open, and he's sitting there with an arrow tapping it on my hat, just like talking shit into my ear while I'm trying to shoot to like try to make sure that you have to be focusing on your process and ignoring everything on the outside and just focusing on that. And it helped out so much by being able to learn from that. But anyways, I figured I'd share that with you and everybody else.
Yeah, that's interesting. Are you a trigger style guy, or are you what kind of release are you using?
I shoot a thumb button.
You do?
Yeah, I do shoot a thumb button. The only time where I feel like that's like I have a disadvantage is when you start getting like colder weather and you have like bulk and clothing around your neck. It's kind of you have to be careful you don't hit your trigger. It's hard to get a good anchoring point there. But I don't think it. And Joel teaches like it doesn't matter what you're using, but I feel for me personally, I can shoot better with that than I can a trigger, and that's just I like using a thumb button better than that, and that's just my personal preference. And it sounds like you shoot a trigger then.
Yeah, so I have always shot a trigger. I've always liked a trigger, and like Josh Bomar, right? That's his name.
Yep.
He's got a really good video kind of breaking down all the stuff with target panic and using a thumb release, and a number of guys convinced me to go to the thumb style release, and I bought the best damn one there was out there, and I practiced all summer with it. And one time in the summer, as I was drawing back, my thumb hit, I don't know, my chin or something, and I sent the arrow across the yard. So then you start getting paranoid.
Yep.
And I'm like, whatever, we're gonna block it out. And I went into the season, and I always draw back when I get in the tree and just kind of check everything out, make sure it's good. And just before killing my buck that I killed this year, I drew back one time, and the thumb hit my chin again, and it sent the arrow into the dirt. Now I was like, man, is taking a deep dive here, and I can kind of explain what I did as the story goes on, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's interesting that you've had that happen, and the like it took me a long time to really get comfortable with that thumb release. And like now, like when I draw back, I actually push the front of my thumb into the back of the barrel when I'm drawing, like as I'm coming back, because I'm so concerned of hitting that until I get into position. Then I wrap my thumb around it and kind of sink it in there. And I have it set somewhat heavy too, so like it takes me in. And I'm no coach in this, so just take this with a grain of salt. But like when I'm pulling through my shot, I just release pressure in my hand, and nobody else can see this, but I'm showing Joe across the screen here, and as it does that, it just makes your thumb go off. So I'm not actually hitting the trigger. I'm just like pulling back, and it's putting pressure on it. So I'm just squeezing. I'm just pulling. I actually say this in my head: pull, 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 as I'm just focus on that point, and then it just goes off with a surprise. And it's helped me out a ton. But but what it comes down to too is like with anything with whitetail hunting is that confidence. If you don't have confidence in using it, it's like you might as well throw it. You might as well throw the best release that could be $250 release. You might as well throw it in the garbage, because if you don't have confidence in it, it's not helping you any.
Correct. And here's so many deer, and this deer that I killed this year, I was at full draw on it, we think, for 4 or 5 minutes, and my arms were turning into noodles. And I did end up killing him with a trigger style release. And I just feel like if I had that thumb style release, my fingers would have gotten funny on me, and I would have had to have let down, and I don't know what would have happened. Maybe I would have bumped the thumb. So that messes with me again. So yeah. Yeah, I guess here's where my head's at now. I'm like, you follow Cam Hanes, right? Everybody follows Cam Hanes.
Mm-hmm.
He shoots a trigger style release all the time, and he's fine with it. So there's one man in the world that can do it. I'm going to be number 2. So I'm going to keep working at the trigger style release.
Well, it's funny because everybody I've heard other than Joel has been like, oh, you need to go to a hinge or a thumb style, or a back tension to shoot good and get rid of target panic. And Joel's like, it doesn't matter what release you're using. If you know how to get your head right and operate it, they should all work the same. You should all be, so I really think that. So that's where I think that, like, I think it's whatever you feel confident. You feel confident with your trigger style. You and Cam, you guys are out there doing it. It's that's exactly right. So I
know. I know I'm being a wise guy. I know a lot of people shoot them successfully, but it's exactly what you said. Even Beau Mar said, throw your trigger style release away. And it's like, shoot, no, man, that's not me. I think I need my trigger style.
No, I'm not. I'm not gonna throw it away.
Yeah.
But back to so after that, with the videoing of screwing up on that buck and everything there, what happened then? Did you go back to focusing on that original deer? And you were starting to talk about Mario. Talk a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Mario was looking to kind of switch up what he was doing, and he drove up to hunt out here, and I said, let's go. I got this trail camera on this signpost rub. Let's go check out that trail camera. And we went and pulled the card, and there he was. He was checking the signpost rub. I think his antlers were touching it in a few photos, and that's interesting to me, whether they're just sniffing it or they're actually marking it or not. It's kind of interesting. But he was marking it that time, and it was like 10 minutes after legal light. And we're like, holy crap, this thing might be coming down out of the top, the upper clear cut, that bedding area where I was previously running the wireless camera and that I showed in the Instagram post. And I said, have at her. I'm gonna go try and kill that other buck that I messed up on. Like I just hate. I had a buck the previous year that I messed up on, and it's been in my head ever since. So I needed to get that other buck out of my head. So I need to go kill him. And I told Mario, have at her. And Mario put in 2 or 3 hunts. That night, he saw some deer come out of that thicket, I believe, at last light. It was kind of gray light, couldn't tell what they were. And then I don't know if it was the next morning or a few mornings after, he went back up in there, got in there, set up super early, and right in gray light, he had a heavy-footed deer come in. And Mario's a super sharp dude. I don't know. There's a lot of different types of hunters out there. It's always interesting to observe them. Some people are kind of your more instinctual, go with the flow. Everything is like fluid. And then there's the guys like Chad from Exodus Trail Cameras. He's got like this photographical memory where he looks at everything and he's got it. He's got like his own onyx in his brain. And Mario's kind of the same way. And so he said, he's like, Joe, when that deer came in, it had heavy feet, I could tell. And he set up, he was trying to learn the area. He sat back and was kind of observing a little bit, and the deer nailed him coming up in there. And then as it got lighter, a smaller buck went up into that bedding area and actually got up into there without nailing him. And then that night, Mario adjusted over, and the smaller buck came out. He ended up killing it. And you can see that in the Instagram post as well. So that was pretty cool to see him have success in there.
Yeah, that was a nice buck too. Like that was super cool, and I liked hearing that story of how he went in there, and then how you kind of thought also like that area was screwed up because you guys were taking care of the deer and
Yes.
and doing everything. So that was really interesting to be able to hear that.
Yep. So yeah, excuse me. The way I thought about it is exactly what you said. In the swamps, you go in there, you shoot a deer. That spot is shot for a month at least, and that's what I had anticipated there. Now, I believe, I don't remember if it was before or after Mario killed his. It was before, actually. I was down in a different parking lot, and I ran into, there was a young boy sitting in the parking lot, and I honestly thought he was doing drugs or something in the parking lot. Like whatever he was doing was super weird. And I'm like, I'm headed that way. And I'm like, you're not headed that way, are you? Like, I just want to make sure he wasn't hunting. And he's like, no. He's like, I'm cleaning out my truck. I'm like, you're cleaning out your truck? He's like, yeah, I'm cleaning out my truck. I'm like, okay, whatever. And he's like, I saw a big buck. He's like, I saw a big buck the other day. I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, where'd you see that? And he's like, across the road the night before, across the road, right over here. I'm like, really? I'm like, what, it was big, or like, what did it look like? And he's like, it was big. He was cussing and swearing about it. I won't swear on your podcast, but he was cussing and swearing about it. And I showed him a picture of a medium-sized buck on my phone. I'm like, was it this buck? He's like, no, it was way bigger than that. And I'm like, shoot. I'm like, that's got to be the buck coming down out of that thicket. Like, I'm all starting to put it together.
Yeah.
So then,
yeah, and you're probably like second guessing yourself, like, do I still believe this guy because he might be on drugs, but it's
yeah. I figured out who the kid was, and I asked somebody else, and they said he's just socially awkward. He probably was cleaning out his truck, so he knows what I'm talking about. But so that was all good, and then so then my bow. Part of it was the release. A whole bunch of stuff was going on with my bow. My arrows weren't coming out of my bow straight. So I, in the middle of all this madness happening, I took my bow to the local archery shop, and we were trying to get it to fling a straight arrow, paper tune straight. And I shoot a Matthews. They were switching the top hats around, all kinds of wild stuff. We could not get an arrow to come out of there straight. So we sent it to Matthews under warranty, and he gave me a loaner bow. It was a Z7 Extreme, so a little short axle bow.
Yeah.
And that same day, somebody told me about a 190-inch buck that they had shined on the other side of the state. He's like, Joe, I saw it right in this field. Here's what I think it's going to do. So I got that loaner bow. I got up super early, got the loaner bow, and I shot in the range at 20 yards. I picked up some cheap broadheads for it, and just some 100-grain broadheads, nothing fancy. And I ran across the state to where he said he had shined that buck, and he told me exactly where he shined it. In the field, it had just rained, and the field was all mud. You could see it real well what was going on. And I zigzagged through where he had seen this buck, and I think it might have been a fish story. There were no big tracks there. And then I went through all kind of the woodlots, did like a speed scout, and it felt wrong. So then I drove all the way back across the state, and it was a crazy day. I drove all the way back across the state, and I got back into the woods where this buck was living. And now since Mario had been there, a lot of leaf drop had happened. So my thought was, now I'm going to hit up all these thickets because a lot of spots have been eliminated in terms of where this deer could be hiding. And I just ran like a madman for a few hours. I was all sweated up, bumping into hikers. We get a lot of hikers up from Chicago. So when they see a dude looking kind of grizzly, bursting out of the brush, all sweaty, like they look scared when they see you. I try to avoid people, but it was just a crazy night.
What time of year was this, by the way, when you said leaf drop? Was it during the rut at this point?
Yeah, this was the night before I killed, which would have been, I don't know. November, like the second week of November.
Okay, gotcha.
So I zigzagged through this whole woods, and I was not finding anything. I wasn't bumping deer. I wasn't finding big tracks. There was nothing that was getting my attention. And I thought, let me go creep over. We had 45 minutes to a half hour of legal hunting light left. And I'm like, let me go creep over that ridge where Mario killed his and just see what's going on. And I creeped over the ridge, and I'm just standing there. And out of the thicket where Mario's buck came, the big one tried to go up in, was a nice 2.5-year-old, like 120-inch 8-point. And it was nice, but it's like, gosh, that's just not what I want to use my tag on. And it was exciting, but that was where it clicked in my head. And I'm like, shoot, these deer are still using this thicket. Even after we made this mess in here, they're still using this thicket. And so then I called Mario that night. I'm like, you wouldn't believe this stuff. I'm like, we got the gut pile right there. We made all that mess in there. And there's deer still coming out of there. I said, I could see that big boy, the big one, coming back in there the next morning. And I said, if that 8-point goes back in there, I got a good friend that I hunt with once in a while. I called him up. I'm like, hey, you want to come hunting with me in the morning? I said, I'm going after this big one. I said, there's a chance this 8-point goes back up in there and you can have him. And he's like, all right, yeah, dude, let's do it. So that night I sat there on the phone with Mario for quite a while, and we're just taking a shot in the dark in the morning. And we kind of picked how we had to get up in there. He sent me a few pins back and forth. And that morning we got up bright and early. I believe it was our first snow of the season. And I love that because I've seen many times, and I think I heard you mention it too, that first snow, you see them come back to bed late. It seems to help.
Yep.
And so we got up early that morning, and we got super high in the tree. The way we got in could have been a little bit better. Our access could have been a little bit better. But we got super high up in the tree because it's just big hardwoods, and we didn't want to, with two blobs up in the tree, we didn't want to get nailed. And sitting there, the wind was good. The wind was it was gonna switch right at prime time, so we were set up for that. And as it got light, about an hour went by and nothing happened. And we're just kind of chit-chatting, shooting the breeze, and I heard you talk about this as well. If they don't come in at first light, they're probably not coming in. And with how high pressure it is and everything. And we were just sitting there shooting the breeze, and I looked down in the draw that I had anticipated him to come up out of. And there, I actually turned to my buddy. I said, dude, there's a deer coming, grab your bow. And as he was grabbing his bow, I hit it with the binoculars, and I was like, shoot, it's the big one. I said, put your bow down. I was a little mean, but like he knew the deer I'm after. And I grabbed, actually it was snowing 15 minutes prior, that Z7 Extreme, there's a whisker biscuit on there. And I know a lot of people laugh about whisker biscuits, but I had actually took my finger and melted all the ice off the arrow. And I'm so glad I did that, because that deer was coming up. He was coming straight up to us, and I drew back on him, and he hit, I don't know, it was like 45 yards out. He had hit where we walked in, and normally in the swamp, the deer would be like, holy crap, there's a human here, I'm out of here. And he stood there for like 2 minutes just smelling it, like watching him sniff the foliage. It was so interesting. You could tell he was just smelling us, making a decision. And at this point, because we sat in the dark for an hour, that scent was like 2 hours old. And one thing I maybe haven't explained on the podcast here, this spot is tied up to a hiking trail. When you're in the tree, you can hear people walking by, talking. You're tied up to a hiking trail. So this deer is just used to people. And determined, like I said, his scent was 2 hours old. And he was like, whatever. So finally, he started strolling back up to us. And at this point, my arms were like noodles. And I almost forced a shot. And I'm so glad I didn't force a shot. It was like at 35 yards. And he turned, came straight, almost straight underneath us, kind of quartering forward. And I remember in my head, I just went through everything. I didn't have that camera, and I went through everything. And I remember saying, bend at the waist, because he was like right below me. And I remember saying, bend at the waist, off. And I aimed pretty high. I was almost shooting down into him. And that arrow hit him. And with the white snow background, I watched the blood shoot out of his back a few feet in the air. Oh. It was like shooting a pressure valve. And he ran around the back of the tree. And I told my buddy, I'm like, I think once that arrow went off, I blacked out for like a few seconds, because like everything was just gone because of how long I held the bow. And the buck ran 100 yards, and we watched him roll, and we were both like, holy crap. Like, it just, the way it all happened was so cool. And I guess the rest was history. We got down out of the tree, and I'm like, where did this thing run? And like, I couldn't remember the deer running. I just remember it rolling, because like I said, I blacked out. And he's like, it ran around the back of the tree. I'm like, really? I don't remember that. But it was cool. It was good fun.
Yeah, it's funny, like you talk about bending at the waist. As you said, you listened to that podcast earlier that I did, my buck that I shot, where I missed him on the first shot. Did you hear that part of it? And I didn't bend at the waist, and that I did.
I thought that today. Yeah, I'm like, should I mention my bend at the waist part of the podcast? I don't want to be condescending. Like, hey, I bent at the waist. You did.
No, it was like, as I said there, like I was just like so confident that like this deer is already in the bed of my truck that it complete rookie mistake. And no, I don't mind talking about it. It's I need to relive it so I don't do it again, right? And it's one of those things that no, that is just awesome. And so explain a little bit about like that setup where you guys, you and Mario talk back and forth about it, and there was a thicket there in the hiking trail. Were you like right on the edge of the thicket? Like could you like shoot into thick stuff, or how did that look?
Yeah. So I've scouted that spot a ton since I've killed him to try and understand it. And remember, I said we were set up for the wind to switch right at prime time, and that buck coming up in there late kind of threw a wrench into that. And I remember as he was coming up, I thought, oh no, this thing is going to wind us. And I started looking at the snowflakes falling, and they were falling the opposite direction they should have been. And what we think happened, so we were sitting way higher than this thicket, and up above this thicket, there's a ridge. So what we think was happening was the wind was coming over the ridge and then hitting the wall of trees that we were in. And my buddy Justin Wright told me what it was probably doing was eddying. Have you ever heard of that?
Yep.
Wind eddying.
Yep.
It was hitting the trees and rolling back a bucket, or maybe it was shooting down into the thicket, and that's why he like laying in there. But the thicket was so thick you couldn't shoot into it. We were just right on the edge of it, and he was 20 yards from being in the thicket when I shot him.
Okay.
So that was how we got a bulletproof spot with the way the wind was doing that.
Interesting. And and like an eddy, so like for anybody that's like listening, it's basically like if you think like an undertow with a wave, like it goes one direction and then cuts and then comes kind of down or back. And yeah, that makes sense. And with do you think, like, obviously you're not in the head of the deer, but like were you assuming like he was like going to scent check that for does, or do you think that he was like gonna head back into that thicket? Like, do you have any idea like what that deer was thinking of doing?
Yeah, so I went and checked the trail camera down on the signpost rub after I killed him, and I actually have pictures of him that morning just sniffing the signpost rub. He never touched it with his antlers, which I thought was interesting. And from where he would have been, from the time he was on the camera to the time and the direction of where I saw him, he was at my left and he worked past me to the right and then worked up to us. So I believe he checked a few bedding areas before he got up to us. But I also think he wanted to come up that draw. He wanted to come up that draw that he came up ultimately, because I think the wind goes down to him in the draw usually. I guess, does that answer your question?
Yeah. No. I was just, I'm visualizing it in my head. I have it. I like when someone tells a story, you like kind of picture what the spot looks like and how all that works. Yeah. No, I'm visualizing that in my head and trying to understand it. One thing to comment about the signpost rubs thing is, like when I talked about that on the podcast in the past, there was a specific signpost rub that I've run them on a bunch cameras on a bunch of them now, but like this specific one I know I've talked about before, where I'd get a lot of deer passing it, but I only ever got like, it was literally I think the oldest deer in the area that would hit it, and I got some really cool video of him just shredding this tree, going up and down it, but he only did that one time, and every time I would go in there and I'd spray forehead gland scent on that signpost, he'd be there within 24 hours checking it. He wouldn't hit it, but he'd be coming through that area. I've had it where he was there 2 hours after I was. Like, it was pretty crazy to see that. And this year though, that spot, like, I didn't have as much action. The buck came through like I literally ran a cell camera on it from like June until I just pulled it last weekend. So like, and I had to change the batteries one time in the middle of it, but I didn't have as many bucks. I didn't have any bucks hitting it this year, but I had them travel by it. And I hear like the trackers up in Maine, like Hal Blood, who I've had on the podcast, where he focuses on signpost rubs a lot for looking for tracks. He says that's always like a travel route. Like that's his scouting is like find a signpost rub and then follow the elevation line and try to cut a track. And it was super interesting as I've been running cameras on them, to see how deer utilize them. And there was multiple bucks that would pass by this spot, but only that real big one actually hit it. Yeah.
Because Jake Bush had asked you on your podcast too, the timing of the year that you're seeing him hit it.
Yeah.
And the big boy, well, in my scenario, the big boy only hit it kind of during that rut timing when they're ramped up.
Yep.
The little ones would fool around it at all times of the year. But there's even a 3-year-old that hit it, and that was only when things were ramped up.
Yep. Yeah, it's super interesting to just kind of to learn from those, and I never paid attention to rubs really that much before. Like I'd know like, okay, this is a high rub, there's a buck living here, or maybe if it's a bunch of them grouped around a spot that I think might be a bedding area, okay, that might be it. But I never really never ran cameras on them or paid attention to them, and it's been neat to kind of just really out of curiosity to see how deer utilize them and pay attention to it. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, just the experimenting side of it. Yeah. I do
that a lot with cameras. I do that a lot with cameras. Like just like having a hunch, like, could this, like, the situation, I don't know, I'll throw a camera on it and see what, how deer are using it, or if they are at all, and just kind of just experiment. That's how you learn.
Yeah. I always say, if you see all these states banning trail cameras or wireless trail cameras or whatever, it's like, let's say cameras ever get taken away from us entirely, all the states, which I don't think will happen. We, as a generation, we're going to be very fortunate because we have all this intel that we gathered from cameras that the next generation might not,
Yeah.
So take advantage of it while it's here. You never know what might happen in your state. So
yeah,
learn all you can from trail cameras. I've run a lot of trail cameras over the top of beds and have seen some interesting stuff. And it's just interesting stuff that you can kind of tie back and consider. And when you're thinking about that next buck you want to kill, you can think, okay, I saw this one buck do this. Maybe this buck will do that. It's one more little thing you can put in the brain.
Yeah, it's just you take all these pieces of the puzzle and they might not apply in every situation, but just one little thing to think of and determine, okay, is this a similar situation? There's so many different factors, but if you can be cognizant and learning of everything that you're seeing and putting it all together, that's the fun of it, in my opinion.
Yep.
Yeah. Are you doing much just transition a little bit here, but are you doing much scouting now? Are you a big postseason, like your spring scouting kind of guy?
Yeah. Yep. I guess I kind of have a plan. I've got 2 different bucks that I want. One of them, I don't even know if he's alive, but if he is, I want to be ready for him. And another one, there's a buck. How do I explain it without saying too much? There's a buck that I want to see if I can kill him in a different way than what I would have to. So I've been stalking. Stalking's a terrible word. Is it Troy Pottinger?
Yeah, Troy Pottinger.
With the synthetics and the scrapes. And I think what I might do a little bit of experimenting. So many people say don't mess with that kind of stuff, but gosh, I think I need to do it and fail for myself if it's a bad idea in these high pressure areas. But I'm gonna try some of the synthetics this year, I think, and see what he's doing and observe what he's doing and try to copy it to the T on a certain buck to see if I can pull him out of a certain area during the rut. So we just lost our snow, so I want to try and go find some scrapes. They get covered pretty well still, even with winter and the leaves falling and everything. But I want to try and find some scrapes to see what's going on with that buck. And then there's a different one that a different buck that I'm going to hunt. It's a similar terrain, but I've just been walking it to try and memorize the terrain and get it in my brain, like what it looks like, how it lays. And man, every time I walk it, you don't see something different necessarily, but you get a different perspective. And I'm hoping at some point I'm going to have the same perspective all the deer have as I walk it, because when you just walk into an area, you're never seeing it right. You got to walk. I believe you got to walk it over and over and over, and then you start to see it the way the animals see it.
Have you ever noticed, like, I don't know, for me, like when I go into certain areas, there's one area I have not hunted yet, and I'm in year 3 of scouting it, and I find myself scouting it the same way every time, like fall in the same type areas. I'm like, okay, I got to veer off of this, or maybe there's a reason for why I'm doing it this way, and trying to understand and like covering, maybe even walking 10 yards up this way, and trying to see it differently and understand it. I totally agree, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts. So like, I actually buy the synthetic straight from Troy. I use those on all of my licking branches. I can't say I'm as disciplined as Troy with like his exact procedure of building scrapes, or as he calls it, the traps, as he's trapping whitetails, as he puts it, like with his scrapes. But I do use those scents and when I'm building my scrapes, or mostly just freshening up ones that are already there. But I'm a huge, I don't use any other scents. I don't use any like deer pee or anything. I piss in all my own scrapes, and then I just spray the forehead gland on the branches, and I use that on the rubs too. And I've had really, really good luck with them. I've liked it. I don't know, maybe they would have hit them anyways, but for me, I'll do that in the summertime. Like I start running my cameras on scrapes in the summer, and I'll get, like, especially areas that you're not allowed to like run minerals in the summertime or anything, like to get inventory. I'll run them on some of those scrapes, and you can get a really good inventory that way, at least in the areas that I hunt.
Yeah, that's what he was saying as well, and I don't know. I'm curious to see how it'll work. We'll experiment with something different. That is very interesting.
Yeah, you have to report back to me on how that works. I'm interested to hear that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Cool. Well, Joe, is there anything else you can think of? Anything else you want to share with anybody, or whatever else?
No, nothing that comes to mind.
Yeah. Well,
that's the story of my season, I guess.
Yeah. Other than it's a great time to be in the woods now, as it's springtime and before green up, and heck, this is my favorite time to be in the woods. I spend more time now. I spend as much time now as I do during hunting season. Like, I just love doing it, just walking and I don't know. It's just one of the
there's a lot of people out. You probably see a lot of people out as well, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Walking.
Oh yeah. There's people are out shed hunting quite often and putting a lot of boots on the ground, and I love it. I just like whether it can change. There's so many things that can change by the time the season comes. So I still do a ton of in-season scouting, but like historical data can be so impactful, especially in areas like that you've got to experience in Pennsylvania that may not have like big crops like acorn, even having not even having oak trees, and it's just like browse. So like a lot of those areas have more annual patterns that you can follow versus ones that are food source driven. And I don't know. I get so much value out of spring scouting.
Yeah, no, I follow your Instagram stories. I can tell you're obsessed. You're eating up with it every single weekend you're out there.
Oh, I love it. I mean, I literally smile like I'm in the woods, and I'm like, last couple of years I haven't had as much time and it's still like I said it to somebody. I was like, yeah, they're like, you've been out a lot. I was like, man, I actually feel like I haven't been out that much this year. I feel like I've been too busy. And they're like, you're out all the time, and I'm like, well, before I'd be like every single day after work, I'm out like just for a couple hours, just trying to find areas and checking things out, and it's just, I don't know, I love it.
Yeah. You're out more than the average person.
Yeah,
say.
Yeah.
There's a few of us that put in this crazy amount of hours, and we always run into each other. There's like 2 other guys in my area that I run into because they're doing like statistically, when you're out that much, you're going to run into them. You have some big country out there? Do you have a few other guys that you run into that are local killers?
Yeah, I do. I do. Yeah. And it's funny. I actually had a guy the other day send me a message, and he's like, hey, I think I found one of your trail cameras. I go, where was it? And he named the spot. I'm like, yeah, that's mine. I said, actually, I put that out last April, and I haven't been back yet. Because like there's some areas it takes me a while to get back to, and it was funny. But I do run into some of those other guys that are putting in a lot of time, and I guess that confirms. I'm like, all right, I'm in a pretty good spot if these guys are in here too. So.
Yep. Depending upon the size of the spot, sometimes it's like, oh boy, if they're in here, I might as well just bounce and go somewhere else.
We're gonna be hunting the same spot.
But or some of the older guys, that's where you want to meet them and know them and learn from them and learn what they've learned about hunting that type of country their whole lives. I've learned a lot of good stuff from the locals too that way.
Yeah, I actually did that a couple years ago. I started hunting a new area, and there was a local guy in there that gave me some trouble about hunting there at first, and then once I got to know him and he saw that like I was putting in the work, he was like an open book with sharing information and like just being super helpful, and I appreciated that. Like just it's like, oh, I've been hunting here for 20 years, and just had a list. I mean, showing pictures of the deer that he was killing, and I was like, man, this is so awesome, and getting to learn from people like that, like I soak it up.
That is cool. Yeah, and all those guys, they see the woods a different way. There's no 2 killers that are the same. Like I guess that's the best way to put it. The way they see the woods, and sometimes understanding the way they see the woods and then stealing a little bit of part of that and using it for your own perspective as you walk into the woods is super important.
Yeah. That's something that you said there, and I don't mean to drag this on, but like there was that same guy, I was like, I'd find his setups, and I was like, I would never set up here. Like this is like just those some like open type woods and the way it was, but the area had relatively low pressure. And what I was finding was I was overthinking it. Like these bucks were bedding right like on the edge or even like in the oaks that maybe a little bit of brush or like a little bit of a thicket like kind of in there. As I was going deeper, thinking of other areas that like they're never going to come out to those open woods, by the time it was daylight, or when it was still daylight. And this guy was having luck in early October by doing that just because there wasn't much hunting pressure. And I was like, well, I guess that makes sense. I just didn't think of it that way, but this guy was onto something for that specific area.
Yeah, and it's hard when you have your mind locked in on the way you think deer move and what's happening. It is very hard to change that perspective. You really need to see things happen for yourself because I've been in that exact place. Like I'm thinking of a spot. It was a private spot, and I'd always be diving into the swamp. And there was an older guy that hunted it, and he'd killed some good stuff. And he's like, Joe, you don't always need to be diving into the swamp. And I thought, you're just complaining because I'm going to kill the deer and you're not.
Yeah.
And I just beat myself up in the swamp. And eventually I started backing out and just letting it be and letting the deer come out and catching them in little funnels. And I was like, oh man, he is right. And I had to learn it for myself. But yeah, so some of those older guys you need to listen to and pay attention. And
100%. I totally agree. Well, Joe, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me here. I hope everyone goes and checks out. You can see like the story that we talked about here on Instagram and some of the photos he's talking about in videos. Your Instagram, I believe, is Rentmeester Joe. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Or I think if you just type my name in on Instagram, I should pop right up.
Yeah, and I'll put a link in the podcast notes, and then also you've been on the Hunting Beast YouTube channel there quite a few times. Is there anywhere else you want people to take a look or check anything out?
No, that's about it. Yeah, that's about it.
All right, cool. Well, thank you again for coming on. I really enjoyed it, and we'll be talking to you again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.